Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking from the sincere depths of my vocational and avocational spirit, I would like to propose a toast. But first, I have some good news and bad news. The bad news is, well, we're all going to die. The good news is that it's probably not going to be today. And the even better news is that we get to spend this particular evening amongst our colleagues on this beautiful campus, pondering various abstract thoughts, and in the most simplest terms, we get to think about how to make our lives better. How lucky are we? We're not in poverty, we're not in war, we're not in jail, we're not in a hospital, and we're not at a funeral. Here we are, and by most means and stretches of the imagination, enjoying our lives. And so, a toast. As we say in Armenian, kenats, to life. For me, every sip of this wine represents life. My life, the lives of all of those who participated in its creation, the life of nature, and the lives of all of those it stands to enrich. This is my wine. I am the CEO, and along with my father, the co-founder of the magical 180-hectare estate that birthed this wine. In terms of money, it cost around $20 a bottle, whereas it took 10 years and tens of millions of dollars to create, not to mention the prior decades of labor that personally financed it. As you can imagine, its value for me is priceless, and its eminent success equally so. I can say without the least bit of exaggeration that the journey of its creation, alongside the births of my children, has brought unparalleled meaning to my life and shown me the true value of money spent well. In short, blood, sweat, and tears alongside love, hope, and inspiration. Now, every time I say that, I get very emotional because I live it every time I say it. But like most stories of growth and understanding, of course, it all started in my childhood. My mother was the daughter of a renowned antiques dealer who had amassed a great fortune during the Soviet Union in Armenia. She told me of her childhood home, where the dining room resembled a mini Hermitage, and there was also a grand library filled with countless books. My grandfather's lesson to her was that one of those rooms was a display of riches, whereas the other held the key to wealth. It was an apt lesson indeed, as my grandfather ended up going to jail in Siberia for 7 years and had his riches confiscated or stolen in the meantime. He later told me that he never served a day of captivity in his life, because the only jail that one can be in is in his mind and spirit. Now, this distinction between riches and wealth, or money and meaning, became a recurring theme in my youth. Years later, when I was 8 years old, my mother moved us to America and raised us as a single mother in a foreign country with minimal means. She really was the exemplary of strength and resolve, and instilled in us the values of education and responsibility, and also managed to create a beautiful home for us in the meantime. My father, on the other hand, while he often lived continents apart, showered us with love and affection. And when he began to make a fortune of his own, he showered us with much more. Now, of course, my parents' disciplinary approach or affections towards us was not affected by this sudden economic upswing in our family, but it certainly did change most of the people around us. I noticed how all of a sudden, lots of people were nice to us, like really nice to us. And while I was still in my teens, early teens, I noticed the disgusting truth in this fact. Most people are attracted to money, and they're impressed by it, and some, when given the opportunity, will use and abuse you for it. It left quite an impression, as did associating with people from various economic backgrounds and walks of life, seeing how money played into their lives and how they spent or acquired their riches. Some spent their riches or shared their riches through philanthropy, while others dressed in $50,000 outfits and didn't tip the waiter. And some, actually even worse, were simply rude to those of lesser economic means. It disgusted me. It still does. I guess lots of money is like lots of wine. It just amplifies who you are. Be it generous or arrogant, secure or insecure, positive or constantly complaining. I also learned that if you pay attention to see how people spent their riches or what they showed off, you get a really good sense of who they are and what they value. I mean, how much stuff can someone have and still get excited about it? How much time and money does someone need to spend until they get bored of flashing the bling bling instead of flashing a smile or sincere kindness or the ray of light that we may bring to this shared world of ours? What is the value of money if it does not add value to our lives or to the lives of others? Well, of course, to each their own. We all know some people who are completely content in some fancy wear and using money as a means of self-indulgence or validation. I guess in that sense, ignorance is bliss. Some people are happy buying things they don't need to impress people they don't like. What a simple way of life if your soul or your spirit can afford to live that way. Though, wow. What a volatile and uncertain life that must be, dependent on the boss or the economy or short-lived political appointments for short-lived positions of perceived power. How sad if you search for your life's wealth in riches. Now, granted, such statements were much easier for me to make in my youth. After all, I was both rich and wealthy. And I needed a series of reality checks to show me the other perspective. You know, I was surrounded by loved ones who had countless wisdom to share with me, but it's one thing to live it, and it's one thing to observe it, and quite another to live through it. So, after my first divorce, at the age of 22, and really a series of reality checks outside of my sheltered existence and my loving family who had shown me value by example, I was heartbroken by most of the people in my life. I was shocked, I was angry, I was confused, I was alone, and I was miserable. And so I rebelled, particularly against all of those positive values that had made me so vulnerable. I made a series of very questionable decisions. I spent money as frivolously as possible, as if trying to make truth of the fact that money can't buy you happiness, but I would rather be crying in luxury. As someone who has cried in both luxury and very limited means, I will tell you, as I'm sure you know, that usually the emotional distress of the crying is more or less the same. And so after such period of time, of wasted time and money, my parents gave me an ultimatum of sorts. They said, take a significant amount of money and leave, go and rebuild your life wherever, or you stay with your family, you start to rebuild your home here without a penny of support. I will tell you that despite the hostile relationship that I had with my parents at the time, it was a very simple decision for me to make. I thought, if I go, even with all of that money and whatever success I may or may not have, who am I going to share my life with? My happiness, my joys, my struggles, my fears, my path, my life. And so I stayed. I don't think my parents were testing out my character, but I'm certainly grateful that they gave me a chance to test it out for myself. And so began a strenuous period of self-discovery with countless highs and lows. In hindsight, what a luxury it has been to have had such a roller coaster ride of a life that has shown me what I'm made of and what I can make of my life. Indeed, the most challenging and strenuous and exhilarating period of my life began almost 9 years ago when I moved back to Armenia to be at my father's side to participate in this grandiose vision of his that involved hundreds of people from all over the world gathered amidst rocks and snakes to build an oasis. It was father and daughter versus nature, versus man, versus machinery, versus customs, versus the market, and quite often versus each other as we created ArmAs. Now, along the way, I've done business with countless people. Some were business people, while others were business whores. And I mean no disrespect to the profession of real prostitution, where despite our moral judgments, there's at least a clear exchange of goods and services. Business whores will screw you and others for their monetary convenience or gain, often walking away with more than just your time and money, but a part of your positive spirit and faith in people if you allow them to. I believe the Russian term is bespredel. Did I pronounce that right? Yeah. Depending on the business or environment that you're in, it may actually seem like a brothel at times, where the mission statement is, it's not personal, it's just business. Let's not kid ourselves. It's always personal. And it will always be personal as long as you are a person. And it will never be just business as long as that business is a part of someone's life. How we conduct ourselves in work and in business is how we conduct ourselves in our lives. And it defines a significant part of who we are. So who are you? Who do you strive to be? How will you acquire or spend your riches? And who will you measure yourself up against during the process? Hopefully, it's yourselves. Because there will always be someone richer, someone smarter, someone funnier, someone prettier, someone more accomplished or more successful than you. Unless, of course, you're happy. Or at the very least, content in the trajectory of growth in your life and of your spirit's wealth. Work on your spirit's wealth, and no one will ever outshine you. And in my experience, when you work on your spirit's wealth, the universe happens to work with you as well. But of course, that too is a matter of perspective. Is this glass half empty or half full? Well, I asked God. And as you can imagine, one talks to God a lot after 10 years of investing. And sometimes she talks back. Now, in this particular instance, the message that was meant to be had was that you get to decide if you want to go through life looking at that glass half empty or half full. But what you cannot contest is that there is wine in the glass. In vino veritas. In vino veritas. In wine there is truth. Well, when we had finally had our first bottles of wine, I wasn't sure that there's truth at the end of each bottle, but I was certainly determined to check. And I very often pondered the thought, what is the truth that wine tells? Not just the truths that we're all inclined to tell after a few too many glasses, but what truth does wine represent? Well, in the most simplest terms, as a winemaker in a sense, I can say, to make a fine wine, we take the best of nature, we mix it with the best of our human efforts, and we create a work of art to be enjoyed by us and by others. Unlike most art forms, however, the art of wine continues to develop all by itself in the bottle, even after the artist is through with creating it. In that sense, wine is like life. We take what we were born with, we cultivate it, we nurture it, we use the best of our monetary and our natural resources to live our lives. Our life is our masterpiece. We create it, and we may frame it and display it as we like. A work of art to be enjoyed by all of the senses, with a few supernatural and spiritual senses to boot. A work of art that may be shared by you today and have others share it as your legacy tomorrow. A work of art that stands in the museum of our homes, our societies, and our collective lives. And there is certainly no truer phrase that all of us can say collectively other than, I am alive. In vino veritas indeed. We are alive. We have been given life, but we live it. And so, kenats, to life, to your life. May it be a masterpiece filled with riches and true wealth. Cheers.
Skolkovo.